Hello everyone, welcome back to Bounty Drag Racing. Today we're going to jump back into the game's most popular class, the Pro Modifieds, where I'm going to help you make all of your cars go from doing things like this to running like this. Welcome to Pro Modifieds 201 Suspension School. If you're new to Bounty Drag Racing, I can understand how looking at all the different tune-up settings can be a bit overwhelming without a proper place to start. While Bounty Drag Racing does offer a handful of baseline setups to start with, each car and combination in the class is a little bit different, and those setups may not work with the car you choose. What I'm going to do today is give you my baseline setup and show you how it can be adapted to any car or combination in the class. If you're coming here from other games like BeamNG or whatnot, stick around. A lot of this stuff applies pretty much across the board. Before I do this though, if you enjoy this video or find it helpful, hit that thumbs up button so YouTube knows this is some good shit. If this is the sort of thing you're into, subscribe to the channel for more and leave a comment if you have any questions. If you don't already have Bounty Drag Racing, you can find it in the Steam store. Without wasting any more time, let's go to the track. We'll begin with the first gen Camaro. This is the OG car in the class for Bounty Drag Racing, so much of the class physics would have been based on this, making it a perfect place to start. The most difficult part when starting out in Bounty Drag Racing is just getting a car down the racetrack. Truth is, once you've solved that problem, most of the work is done. No matter what you do, these cars will only go so quick, and there's very little difference going from track to track, day to night, hot or cold. Given that the tuning window is actually the size of a small hangar door, with enough direction to not smash into the side of the building, you're going to make it down the racetrack every time. The first thing we're going to do is choose an engine. A setup that works for a big block blower combination will also work with a centrifugal supercharger or twin turbos with virtually no changes. Using a nitrous combination requires different transmission settings, but we'll cover that in a bit. For now, we're going to start with a big block blower. To keep things simple, we're going to use nearly the exact same setup for all of the cars and combinations I'll be showing you today. If you're planning to try this for yourself, you can write these numbers down or grab some screenshots. The key to drag racing is making as much horsepower as the track grip levels will allow. Well, there may be small gains to be found using different ignition, clutch, and transmission settings. We're going to focus on the suspension and chassis settings that will allow you to make nearly all the horsepower you like. If you plan to use the automatic shifting, these numbers here are no good. Since I've always shifted manually, I've never bothered to set these up. Now, let's take this tune, as it is, and go make a run in our Camaro. Well, my Camaro. I'm sure yours is a different color or something. Normally, your instincts might kick in here, and you would be tempted to do a long smoky burnout to get the tires good and warmed up. And you're welcome to do so if you like. Just know that it's not having any effect on your grip level whatsoever. Since Bounty is an online-only game, and we're not really mature enough to behave apparently, it's a disabled feature, so we'll just pull straight up to the starting line instead. Not a bad run for an off-the-trailer shift by sound pass. Remember, this is my base tune, not a tune I would actually use in competition. It's a starting point that I pretty much pulled out of my ass that I know will get me to the finish line reliably in any pro mod within a few runs. Had the car not drove itself to the left past half track, that would have been a mid to low 5.6 second quarter mile pass. So let's see how we did that and what we can do to make it go straight our next pass. Just about all the traction you need can be found here in the suspension settings. The objective is to transfer as much of the car's weight as possible onto the rear tires as quickly as possible. Sorta obvious, right? You do a lot of this with the front suspension settings. Put simply, lowering the spring or shock bump forces will increase tire grip as will raising the max spring length and the shock rebound. If you get into running the radio classes, some of these settings might be reversed in order to keep the front of the car down. For some of the Bounty Pro Modifieds, however, landing the front tires on the ground before you're close to the finish line will only result in trouble. It's not exactly realistic, and I'm hoping to see things like this fixed in the future, but for now, that's just how it is. Since the front end is doing its thing to transfer weight to the rear just fine, we won't touch anything here. Looking at the rear suspension, you might notice some of the settings are almost the opposite of what they are on the front. That's because instead of needing to unload weight like the front, in the back, we need that weight forced onto the rear tires as much and as quickly as possible. Pro Modifieds really only have suspensions because it's in the rules. The more force you can transfer directly onto the tires rather than being absorbed by a spring, the better, which is why funny cars and dragsters don't have suspensions at all. With that in mind, using a much stiffer spring force setting and bump force setting will result in more grip. Lowering your rebound a little will help with that as well. The only thing that's not the opposite of the front settings is the max spring length. Most of the cars in Bounty benefit from having higher than normal centers of gravity. Now that we know what does what, how can we use that to make this car go straighter next time? And why is it turning left to begin with? As to why it's turning left, if you've played BeamNG before or other games with more in-depth physics, you might suspect it's something related to engine torque and chassis twist, but in those instances the cars usually drive to the right, not left, and it affects how the car launches more than anywhere else on the track. Here's the same car with the same setup run down the game's 4 prep tracks slowed down. Will the cars drive to the left here at SLM and at Caribbean International Speedway? The track's much straighter at South Motorsports Park, and at Arecibo it goes perfectly straight. If we look at that one from the front, it almost looks like there's a tiny bit of torque steer before it self-corrects as it hits the wheelie bars. I don't know if that's helpful to what we're doing, I just thought it looked cool. So from looking at that, I would conclude the cause is most likely small grade differences in the track surface model. Whether it's a bug or a feature, I don't know. I'm glad it's like that though, because it at least keeps things a bit more interesting. You'll want to keep this in mind though. I'm going to show you how to make this car go straight down this track instead of turning left, but once we've done that, the fixed setup will most likely make the car drive to the right if you use it at the other 2 tracks. Now if you only ever plan on racing at Arecibo in South Motorsports Park or refuse to race anything longer than an 1/8 mile, then you got a setup and you're good to go right now. But for this track in Caribbean International Speedway, we still got some work to do. There are a few simple ways to make a car drive itself in one direction or another. Since we know how all these settings affect grip level now, all we need is a small increase or decrease of that on one side or the other, and we can make the car turn the direction we want. Since this car wants to turn slightly left at this racetrack, we'll increase the max spring force setting slightly on the left side, as well as the bump force, while decreasing those by the same amount on the right side. And in theory, the car will now have more traction on the left side than the right, and that should straighten our problem out. Okay, it's not perfect, but it's pretty good. That was a decent pass and the car did almost exactly what we wanted it to. Well, I'm happy with how that worked. Now let's see what happens when we run this exact same setup again with all 4 of the popular engine combinations, and after that, I'll show you how it works with the other cars in the class. So let's run our old Camaro one last time and see how it works with your favorite engine choice. Unless you're a diesel guy, of course. If that's not a great argument against smell-o-vision, I don't know what is. Anyway, when switching between engines, just be sure to check the boost levels to make sure that they're all maxed out, including the nitrous settings, which should look like this. Since the nitrous combination is a little underpowered off the line compared to the other engines, we're going to have to make a couple gearing adjustments. Without making pass after pass, I'm going to guess a bit and bump first gear up quite a bit, second gear by about half as much to bridge the gap, and I'll raise the final drive a bit as well. Other than that, this is the exact same setup in all 4 combinations. As you can see, not a lot of difference at all. I'm sure we can find improvements with each by messing around with gearing and such, but I've covered that pretty well in my previous Pro Mod tutorial, as well as how to make use of the data logger, so we won't go into it too much here. If you haven't seen that, it might be worth checking out as well. It was based on the alpha version of Bounty Drag Racing, so the suspension settings and stuff are a bit different, but much of the rest still applies today. Okay, I've loaded the same base setup that we started this video with into the popular C7 Corvette, the sometimes scary Dodge Dart, one of my favorites, the C2 split window Vet, and this Mustang. Since the Mustang chassis is a little bit different than the others, with the current settings, the wheelie bars are very low. Since I already know that this won't make it down the racetrack like this, I'm going to go with the better too high than low philosophy on this one and raise that up a lot. Besides that, all 4 of these cars are in the exact same setup we started with. There you have it, one setup, 4 different cars, 4 clean passes. I had to drive a couple of them on the top end a little bit, but I'd call that a pretty decent starting point in just about whatever car combination you choose. The results may vary from car to car and track to track, but if you've watched this all the way through, you should be able to deal with that now. If If you did make it all the way through, thank you for watching. I hope you all enjoyed this, and if I've been able to help some of you out, then I'd call that a success. Until next time, keep it in your own damn lane.